Hello there, James True. Happy Friday. Good to see you guys. Missed you yesterday, but glad to be back today in the old cockpit. Speaking of cockpits, we're going to be talking about some castration today. And some of you might be going, dude, why do you keep talking about it? And it's because I keep finding out more information. And I want to share it with you. I want to share my cockpit finds about castration. Castration. Hey, don't cut that lotus. Don't bogart that lotus, my friends. But yeah, I want to talk about that because, as you know, I was looking at some things, and then they make me look at other things, and next thing you know, we're just looking at stuff. So, So this is a sort of a turn on the old Jewish blood libel. In this case, I'm suggesting to you, just for today only, I want you to put on the hat of. Actually, this is sort of like a weird psychological thrill kill kind of a thing going on, and we're gonna be talking about that a little bit. I'm certainly brought up. I'm still researching. I'm still learning. I've been reading this great book called Burning for the Buddha. It's tedious but great. really enlightens me a lot on the psychology, not necessarily the psychology of castration or being a eunuch, but although there's certainly some things there, but more the psychology of what is identity in China. Identity's a much more fluid thing, and I would argue that it there's going to be a moment in time where your genetic line is going to be moving into this transcendental nature, believe it or not, that China has. And in order for China to get there, they had to cut off a lot of genitals. They did. They cut a lot of their genitals off. And the whole time, I think it's the underpants gnomes. They're just like, look, I don't know why we're cutting off our genitals, but if we just do it in 1,000 years, someone's gonna invent an internet, and then someone else is going to invent a YouTube platform. Then someone else is going to do a show about why we cut our genitals off, and then only then will we know why we did it. And I think we're getting there every day. We're getting closer to the family jewels. I mentioned to you that for a period of 1,500 years, there's been a struggle in the Chinese political realm of who controls China, and a lot of that period was controlled by castrated eunuchs. That's what do you call that when you repeat what you just said? It's one of those things. Wow, you already know how good this show is going to be if I can't think of that word. But 1,500 years the country was controlled by eunuchs, and it would go back and forth. It was a pendulum. It would swing back and forth, and there were times when society itself would throw everyone out and reject all the eunuchs. And there were times when another emperor would get power and actually align with the eunuchs and bring them back in. So it was this constant push-pull, tug-of-war with the genitals of China. The 10 attendants, this is roughly around 168 through 189 AD, was sort of like the height of their power, but a group of 12, don't ask me why they're called the 10 attendants, but a group of 12 eunuchs basically ruled China. There was another famous eunuch who turned out not to be a eunuch. He was diddling the queen there, and they tried to overthrow the young emperor. Young emperor is like, "Mom, you cheated on me with a eunuch, and now you're trying to overthrow me." And made him kind of crazy, made him kind of nuts. It's actually, do you get it? Made him nuts. It made him nuts because his mom was having an affair with a eunuch. They had 2 kids together. They're secretly plotting to turn their 2 kids, which are children of the eunuchs, to overthrow China before it even established itself as having an emperor. And the emperor's like, "You guys are driving me nuts. You're driving me nuts." Some of you are like, "How did eunuchs have children?" And that's the thing. Or that's not the thing. It's this this was a lot of people pretending on both sides. I'll put it that way. You actually would the eunuchs would carry their jewels, their family jewels, inside of a container. That container had a little label, and the label identified the person, the precious that was kept inside, and that this was literally your ticket into some of the most innermost chambers of Chinese royalty, because you were considered trusted enough to go inside. So there's a lot of interesting philosophy that much more than I thought was ever there when it comes to castration and political rule. And Rome is no exception to that. Before we get to Rome, though, just reminding you, Osiris lost his penis. A lot of miracles happened. It was restored magically, and then the world was saved. Anu lost his penis. It was not destroyed magically. Literally, Kumarbi literally just bit it off. He's like, "I'm biting off your testicles." Uranus lost his too by his own son. And so this is not a new thing. There's definitely something going on here, right? There's something to this whole, hey, let's castrate ourselves for God kind of a thing. This is fascinating. I want to thank my patrons for letting me research this, but check this out. So, under Claudius, for some reason, Rome decided, you know what, you guys can castrate yourselves now. 41 AD through 54 AD, it wasn't exactly those years. This is the reign of Claudius. But under the reign of Claudius, he brought back castration. He was the pro-castration candidate. Look at him. He looks like, he's like, you know, I wouldn't mind if you wanted to cut your pee-pee off. That's what he says. And this was despite Rome, you know, actually making this forbidden. It was verboten in viratio, castration. But here's the thing that I think you're going to go, hey, wow, look at that. There's a clue. James found a clue for us today, and that clue is actually here. It comes in when we look at Domitian. Sorry, I do not say these things out loud enough. Domitian. And this was the ruler right after Titas, Vespasian, which we've talked about. Some of you might be going, wait a minute, we were just talking about that guy. Yeah. That guy, the person right after him, said, hey, you know what? Enough of the cutting off the nuts. It's illegal again. And sometime in his reign between 81 and 96 AD, he's like, no more cutting of the nuts. Okay. This is a big clue. I think this is a big clue. Okay. So first of all, notice that both these things are happening. Let me get out of the way. Both these things are happening. Let me get out of the way. Both these things are happening within a few decades of each other. And the point I'm trying to make is between 50 BC and 50 AD, or maybe you even want to say between 100 BC and 100 AD, people were chopping their nuts off like nobody's business. And I think that there was a sequestered, strong desire, which you're about to see, to hide this fact, to erase it from the record, to remove it. Just like the member was removed, so too did what happened was removed. And this really probably was what was necessary to distinguish the cult fanatics from the followers, the fanatics from the followers. If you're Rome, who do you want to lead? You want to lead the followers. You don't want to lead the fanatics. Fanatics are high maintenance. They're high maintenance. They may be easier in some regards, but overall they're high maintenance. Origen of Alexandria. Feel free to correct the pronunciation for me in the comments. Circa 185 to 253. Also known as Origen Adamantius. That's a pretty cool name. Cut his nuts off when he was little. Not only did he cut his nuts off when he was little, but he denied that he did it. And on his deathbed, he said, anyone who would cut their nuts off is obviously a fool and has no idea how to reach the Christ. And I think you're looking at someone who... okay, so you know the adage where if you're young, you should be a liberal, and then if you reach an older age, you should be conservative, and that this is like a path of wisdom, because there's just certain things. I'm not saying this is across the board, it has to be this way. I'm just saying, but that's a saying. I'm just saying it's a saying. Stop. Fine. Reject me, but it's just a saying, okay? And that saying is sort of the same kind of a thing would be seen here, where Origen, when he's younger, is like, I will cut my nuts off. And when he's older, he's like, man, I should not have been so gung-ho, because I kind of I'm having phantom scratches is probably what's happening. He's probably like, every morning he's waking up and he's like wanting to scratch his nuts. Guys, you know what I'm talking about. And you know, it's kind of like when you open the refrigerator at night. You don't need to eat. You're just basking in the bountifulness that is your refrigerator. And it's, you know, lit. It's got colors. There's like butter and stuff. You know, it's like really sophisticated things in here. Same thing's happening in the morning. Guy's getting up and he's like, I'm going to touch my nuts. And we use the excuse, guys, you know this. We're like, we're going to scratch our nuts because that's our excuse. That's our excuse to worship the Priapus in the morning, to just make sure it's there, to be like, you guys good? How are my commandments down there? You know, and they're like, all 10 of us are here, everything's all good, you know, and no one's been crushed, no one's been mutilated. You didn't wake up in a cult, right? Back then you did. And one of the earliest ones was Origen of Alexandria. Think about this. This is, you know, northern Egypt, right? Right around that area. Same place where they're doing all the weird ram magic. You gotta admit, guys, this is pretty funny that Origen was considered the greatest genius the early church ever produced, and there's a fresco of him right here. Something's hanging from his, what used to be his testicles. This looks like a little blood juice there coming down there. A little sacred tear of the Gonasius Sacos. You know, the Sacos Tyros. And what has he got in his left hand? He's holding his nuts. He's holding his nuts in the left hand. The greatest genius the early church ever produced. Hit that thumbs up, ladies and gentlemen. This is all there. You can find this. Tertullian died shortly after 220 AD. I just want you to again see we're all in that same little pocket. No pun there intended. I have enough puns. I won't need to take that one, so we're just going to let that one go. But died inside that same pocket of that right there around that same time period. And that most famous for being the first writer in Latin known to use the term Trinity, and ironically thought people should live without their Trinity, was actively thought that to truly follow Christ, all of us must be eunuchs. This again was something that was denied later, that the church later came back in and said he did not say that. He did not say that. There were a few patron saints, a few venerated saints that had castrated themselves, and that they were expunged from the record, removed from the Holy Church calendar. Some of them were allowed to stay as long as they did not say that they cut their junk off. And I think Jesus is one of these people. I really do. I brought this up kind of in a whim last week about this whole thing with maybe it looks like if Jesus was suffering at all, it would be because of this possibility that he castrated himself. It was a throwaway line. It was more intuitively throwaway. There's another pun. I'm not going to take it. I've got plenty more. If anyone needs one, there's one. It's a throwaway line. It wasn't even that important. And I've honestly given it more thought, and it's just like, fuck, man, this is probably how it happened. Remind you of the arm of Christi, these like 23 instruments of Christ used to brutalize and to masochize him to reach liberation. Pain is a portal to God is a special presentation I've given where we've directly gone down all the saints, showing you this Olympics of victimhood as they each outcompete each other to find salvation by experiencing the most amount of pain. And it's only now does it strike me as why did Jesus not suffer any kind of genital damage? All of your sensory inputs are right there. Right there. And it's just, it warrants a few episodes. What can I say? It does. It warrants a few episodes. So here we are. Ritual of Osiris. Man, it's a castration ritual, right? The oldest, where Osiris is chopped up into all these pieces, and then with the help of his good ship Isis, it goes around and gathers the pieces and puts them back. And what do you know? There's an old drawing. This is from the 15th century. I'm pretty sure it's 15th century. It could be 14th century on the right here. And it shows a pretty lit Jesus, like fucking lit. That dude is anointed. Look at his eyes. He's just like, what are we doing? And he is bound with the ritual of Lazarus. He's already got his stigmata punctured through his hands, and he's just got a flaming erection with a cloth tied around it. And upon this rock I will build a church. We've talked about this, but even a bigger proof is in the First Council of Nicaea. Remember, now we're out of the Priapus realm. You get into Nicaea, you get into how do we standardize this stuff, and everything starts to be clean, and all the Roman dildos are hidden underneath the church. And the shaming of the Priapus begins, and you end up with a new era because shame itself has now come online. And once shame comes online, you can run your church not on erections, but on shame. So the progress itself has lifted and built itself up. Happy Friday, everybody. And so the First Council of Nicaea has to actually sit there and say, look, we need a note about no castrating yourself. Why did they need to write that down? Do you know how hard it was to write things down? They had to make a lot of copies. But in Canon 1, right away, in Canon 1, it says, if anyone's sickness has been subjected by physicians to a surgical operation, or if he has been castrated by barbarians, let him remain among the clergy. But if anyone in sound health has castrated thyself, it behooves that such a one, if already enrolled among the clergy, should cease from his ministry, and that from henceforth no such person should be promoted. But as it is evident that is said of those who wilfully do the thing and presume to castrate themselves, so if any have been made eunuchs by barbarians or by their masters, and should otherwise be found worthy, such men the canon admits to the clergy. Did you hear that rule? You can't cut your dick off, but someone else can cut your dick off. If you cut your own dick off, you can't stay in the church. But if someone else cut your dick off, you're good to go. Right? Any new people arriving? If your dicketh has been cutteth, vieth needeth, proofeth that your hand did not cutteth, offeth thy junketh, right? And so you will need a note from the person who castrated you. You think I'm kidding. You will need a note from the person who castrated you. You will need a royal seal containing your genitals that have been verified by a committee of doctors who've been approved by the Eunuch Council of World, yes, he really did it, and that only then will you be allowed into our clergy. This is a cult that's like, holy fuck, we can't just get rid of everybody. Half the guys in here don't even have a penis. What do we do? Well, we just need to write this down. And so how long do you think it took them to write this? I think you're looking at a good 3 days. A lot of thoughts, a lot of arguing back and forth. Well, what if, point of order, what if the man only has one testicle? Would this count? And it's like, well, I don't know. It's like, depends. And it's like, what if one testicle was voluntarily removed, but the other was removed by barbarians? Should he be allowed in the clergy? And then they're like, which way do they pee? What do you mean? Which way does the pee go? If the pee goes to the gonad that has been cut off voluntarily, they are stricken from the church. But if the pee floweth in the way of the barbarian, they are welcome to stay. This is probably how they worked it out. I'm just saying, this is probably how they worked it out. Am I losing you guys? So Podesta is a fucking word in Rome. The Podesta. And this is why I think a lot of politics is purposely made up, created with certain clowns, Heyoka clown figures that are used to propagate the worst kind of music you could find, in the sense of the Pied Piper. The Pied Piper of conspiracy will call forth the magic of Podesta, and one of the oldest stories is Simon the Immaculate, this poor little boy, born in 1472, died. You know, we're jumping way up, right? It's now been 1,000 years since the edicts for, and then the edicts against, and then the edicts for, then the edicts against castration, and we're still doing this because there's this Simon the Immaculate character, 1472 through 1475, that died at the age of 3. And we don't know what really happened, but let me just break down the forensics here. 1469, the Prince Bishop renewed the Jewish community's permission to reside and practice there in Trent. 6 years later, Simon, 2.5 years old, went missing around 5 p.m. on the evening of Thursday, March 23rd, 1475. Of course, that's Passover Thursday. The following day, Good Friday, the Podesta, Giovanni de Salis, had his men spread a description of Simon through the city, rumoring, during the search for the boy, rumors were spreading that Jews had taken the child as a blood sacrifice. And these are rumors. Don't want to lose my channel here. I'm telling you about the history of blood libel. On Saturday, March 25th, Simon's father appealed to the Podesta specifically to search the Jews' houses, saying he'd been advised they might have been taking his child. Next day, Easter Sunday, 26th of March, a cook named Seligman went to Samuel the moneylender. Samuel was one of the Jews here. Went to the moneylender's cellar to fetch water to prepare the evening meal and found the boy's body in the water, so says the story. Samuel himself, accompanied by 2 other Jews, went to the Podesta to report the discovery. 1475. Same year, an examination of the corpse, this is like a few days later, examination of the corpse by city doctors determined that Simon had not died of natural causes, but had been exsanguinated. This means to be removed of blood. The entire Jewish community, both men and women, were arrested and forced under torture to confess to having murdered Simon for blood ritual. 15 of the Jews, including Samuel, were sentenced to death and burned at the stake. Now, there was some Jewish women living in the settlement. Keep in mind, Prince Bishop had just renewed their permission. Think about that, their permission to live in this place in Trent. And that the Jewish women claimed that because their gender did not allow them to participate in the blood rituals, that they should be freed. And the town's like, oh, you're right. You're innocent. You didn't do it. And so you have this blood libel story, an awful blood libel story, because Simon is shown in several pictures being castrated like this. He's being castrated and the blood is used. And keep in mind, Simon's a Christian boy. So he's already been, this is not a circumcision. This is a castration. And, we're going to talk about blood libel in a second. Sorry that we've instantly jumped into this, but one of the purposes of this episode is actually to talk to you about why blood ritual works. And I'm sort of like getting some research just out of the way first so we can get to that, because this castration story is getting bigger, not smaller. As far as like for me, just following it and whatnot. So you have a story of an castrated boy, and the castrated boy, the blood from that castration is collected, but it really does just make you, before we get to the blood libel stuff, it really does just make you jump back into Vespasian. And just think about, why was the emperor why would you want to make castration illegal right after Vespasian, the emperor's son, who made all of his money trading eunuchs? Do you see how those are related? Why would the eunuchs are just as much of the influence that's running parts of China is probably happening in Rome. We probably do not know how much of this actually took place, and I don't think we ever will know. I've shown you that James Ballantyne's book has a substantial archaeological find of roughly 5,000 dildos. I think it's 4,999, but I'll tell you why there's one missing later. But the 5,000 dildos were dug up in a Roman urinal, and that you can't find that on the web right now. You can't find that story. Just like when you go to the Vatican and they're like, you can't go down in the catacombs, and you're like, why not? And they're like, because we got stuff down there that's really holy. Then you're like, oh my God, you got like the Ark of the Covenant down there. And yeah, they do, but you don't understand. The Ark of the Covenant is just full of sex toys. It's full of jizz and sex toys. And we've been over this. I'm not trying to be vulgar, but just the Ark, the preserver itself, has always been this fertility ritual thing. We've talked about this a lot. I'm not going to download it all right now to you, but that's not a stretch. It's not me being perverted. It's me telling you that the reason why the Vatican doesn't want you to know about what's down there is because it's embarrassing to them. And that Golgotha was probably a rock that people masturbated on, quite frankly. And just like you can go outside Golgotha and just walk a few miles up the hill, and right now, as we're talking, an old Jewish guy is humping a rock. It's showing you that the same things are taking place, the same things happening. And just like in China, you have these factions that are running the country that have been castrated. So too do you have a cult that's growing up in Rome that has stories of a whore with snakes in her hair, biting your penis, making it burn when you pee. And you've got stories of you turning to stone and dying because you'd be succumbing to the sacred whore. But if you can learn to either abstain, which most people could not, then the amount of willpower, the amount of neocortex fucking crank it takes to pull that kind of willpower to abstain, the only thing that you can do beforehand is create some kind of tourniquet, some kind of way of abstaining. And so you can see how Christianity would be a cult that would quite naturally form in an environment like that. In fact, eunuchs were a thing already. If anything, you could argue that Christianity was not a Jewish cult, it was a eunuch cult. This is a whole other way of looking at it, guys. This is a whole other way of understanding Christianity. And maybe some of you aren't comfortable enough saying, well, which one do I want to have my ancestors in? The Jews or the eunuchs? I don't know. To me, there's no shame, because I'm not the one that's like cranking out, putting my fucking junk on the table and cutting it off. I don't think that I have to carry egregoric shame like that. I think that, if anything, I could be proud of these trailblazers that, quite frankly, were battling some of the deepest monsters that you could ever know, the monsters of sexually transmitted disease. We know from Pompeii, I've shown you that, the bone records themselves shown you there definitely was syphilis here. This is not a reach at all. It's not. Quite frankly, if alcohol changes you as much as the Bacchus rituals did, to where they had to be outlawed as well, then so too would it be quite easy to picture. It's hard psychologically to picture, but it'd be quite easy to believe that there would be wandering bands of castration cults. You could argue that circumcision would be castration light. That the idea that I will put my dick on a barrel and chop off just the tip of it so that I will be accepted among the Crips or the Bloods or whatever gang is in Rome at the time, this would basically be castration light. The cleanliness that was so crucial to Egypt, the reason why they removed all their hair, probably the reason why they circumcised, is also this cult of clean. It was absolute ritual how clean you had to be in Egypt. It's interesting. Much more cleaner than other places, probably because they had the foresight. They had enough of, again, they could see blue. So if they could see the shade of blue, they could probably contemplate things like cleanliness. Meanwhile, in Rome, I don't think that there's like a rational thought about the castrations leading them to the freeing themselves of Medusa even. Maybe the whore thing, but I don't even know if back then it doesn't require a rational reason. Keep in mind that we give ourselves rational reasons for what we do today, and it's not rational at all. You got grown-ass fucking adults spend 10 years in a school, and they come out and they go, yeah, circumcision is for sanitation. That's why they say it. We have an entire DSMV manual that literally explains that, look, self-mutilation is only self-mutilation if there's a majority of other people out there outside of you that vote, yeah, it's self-mutilation. Until people vote that way, it's not mutilation. And at first you might be, well, that's insane. But then you look at piercing your ears, you look at circumcision, you look at all the things that we do or have done historically, and you realize, well, the DSMV, yeah, it's fucking insane, but at least they're being accurate. At least they're just following the trends that we have. So psychology is a trend. It's not a science. It's a trend. There's no way that we could come up with an idea of what would not be self-mutilation. We're like, well, if it's keratin, but then you can't rip your fingernails off, you can only cut them a certain way. And then your hair, you can only do that. It's an endless sign of bumper stocks and abortion pills and plan Bs where we're just simply arguing over the minutia of something. Deep down inside, people had a desire to castrate themselves, probably because they had a desire to gain authority. And just like you have Origen, who's like gung-ho early on, it's like, yes, you must live as Christ. We must live as Christ. Two of these guys said it. We must live as Christ. We must castrate ourselves. And that by the time that the Nicean Creed comes along, by the time you have the Council of Trent comes along, by the time even of the basically every single model that tried to edit the Bible, whether it be the Septuagint, whether it be the Hebrew, every single person, even King James himself, was constantly cleansing this thing, removing these relationships to Priapus the whole time. And one of the biggest relationships with that would be the anti-Priapus, the anti-Christ, which would be the eunuch or the castrati. The castrati. William of Norwich, in his time, the Jews of Norwich brought a Christian child before Easter. Again, another Easter blood libel thing here. They took this, the story says they took William of Norwich and they treated him like Christ, so they crucified him and they castrated him. And I think the reason why this is 1132 to 1144, I think the reason why this is still evident here is because they just weren't thorough. They didn't clean their crime scene. They didn't clean the crime scene well enough. So William of Norwich is still here. William of Norwich is probably what Christ went through, which means he was tortured, all the same tortures which our Lord was tortured, and on Long Friday hanged him on a cross for love of our Lord, and afterwards buried him. And that one extra thing in here is that they castrated him. Why would you one up Jesus? Jesus has suffered more than anyone else. Why would you one up him? This would be sacrilegious unless you didn't one up him, unless you knew back then. Unless in 1000 AD it was still known, still understood what this ritual of castration was about. The ritual of Osiris. It's like hidden in plain view, isn't it? So, when it comes to blood libel itself, so it seems it would end the genetic line. Yeah. So we covered the 4 ways you could castrate yourself. One of them is very graphic. There's actually 5 ways. One of them is to lie. One of them's very graphic. There's no getting around that. In other words, you can crush. In other words, you can press. These are not surefire techniques. And yeah, it did happen a lot. I think it probably happened as much as vasectomies. Are you aware of this? That men have vasectomies and then they can still have children. There's a lot to consider here. There's a lot to consider. So thank you, Veru. Welcome to Giant. Thanks for having you. Appreciate it. And yeah, if you guys want to spread the episode around, let other people know what's going on. I'd love to have more people watching, but I am super happy having you guys here too. So someone had mentioned the other day on Substack about near-death experiences, because we were talking about the melatonin. Remember, you're always walking around with a suicide switch, right? And the moment you die, you let go, and basically your entire body just there's no more DMT inhibiting. So now you're just full tripping. You're just like tripping like some serious balls at that point. And this wait a minute, I just lost my, this kind of experience is invoking a ceremony. So if I bring you to near death and by almost drowning you, right, you're going to dilate. And so when you want to know why rituals tie into dilation so much, it has to do with the phonological loop, the way your brain works. Your brain's going to remember the first and the last. It's going to remember the thing that above all was the most painful experience that you've ever had. your brain's going to remember that. It's going to remember that probably because it's amplified with dilation. In other words, the experience that you have while it's happening is so dilating that it ends up creating the memory stronger than anywhere else. I'm saying this in relation to blood libel because I want you to know that it seems like the oracle mythology is at work, and that ancient man, including modern man, because if I forget to say this, let me say it now. You were evaporating blood cells right now for me. I am evaporating blood cells right now for you. We are participating in a blood sacrifice every moment of your day. Every moment that you go through time, you are burning or evaporating red blood cells. And we forget that because we tend to think of a blood sacrifice as being something where you're physically seeing blood. And you do physically see blood, but we only see this in the actions that we make. Every movement that you have in your body is going to require some sort of will, sending some sort of iron and oxygen directly targeted to the end result that your body needs to do to fulfill this obligation, to fulfill this desire. I think this is the key as to why red blood cells don't have a nucleus. That if you and I were to find our white blood cells, we would be able to take just that one white blood cell, open up its nucleus, pull out the DNA signature, take that DNA signature, place it inside of another egg cell that has no DNA, and now we've just cloned ourselves. So the white blood cell has your code inside of it, your identity. Your DNA is inside of every white blood cell, but it's in no of your red blood cells. The red blood cells begin their life with a nucleus, and as soon as they get enough strength to say, I'm a red blood cell, they empty their core. They devoid their personality. They empty their vessel and become an automaton. They submit to the will of the heart, and the only way they can do that is by putting on the uniform of serving the greater good, of serving the country. These are the firemen, these are the police officers, these are the soldiers, and that they've said, I am here to die for whatever the body needs, regardless of if I want it or not. And they feel pride from this. They are fulfilled from this obligation, and that they pour into the chamber of the heart, and whatever the chamber is going to do. If the heart wants them to curse their own parents, they're going to go out and curse their own parents. If the heart wants them to love and rescue a puppy, they're going to love and rescue the puppy. And we see this now. If you look at the body of Osiris, if you look at the world around you, you see that there are a lot of personalities that don't necessarily seem to have an identity. Many of you will call them NPCs. But you're watching someone that is actually identifying, but they're identifying in a simpler way. They're identifying with the uniform. They're identifying with their purpose. Why? Because that gives them a very important sense of satisfaction. This is a crucial part of climbing the trellis of self-worth. And you will rise up through the ranks of the army or any other bureaucracy until you've reached enough autonomy to say, I'm ready for my own identity now. And so all of your blood is basically eliciting yourself to amplify whether or not your action makes it first. How much is this dilating me? So if you've raised a lamb from the moment it was born, if you gave it a name, if you cared for it at night, if it got sick and you got worried, if you fed it from the bottle and now it's Yom Kippur and you go out and you slit its throat over a grate and you say some holy words over the grate, you have invoked a blood libel. You've invoked a ceremony in your memory, and the power of that ceremony is, I think, directly congruent to how dilated you were during that episode. So when we look at, I need to forgive myself of my sins, and I will do that by sacrificing this lamb, that lamb would need to be innocent in order to become first. You're trying to rewrite the memory. I did this wrong, or I feel this wrong, or I am infected by all the epigenetic violence that I had to commit to survive. Now my conscious is coming online for the very first time, and it's loud as fuck. My conscious is so new that I can't even do drugs. The closest thing I can do early on is to drink some Blue Lotus and just have the ginkgo make me trip balls, because it's just showing me how to dilate. And as I get more and more online and I become more and more aware and more evoked, I start to connect things like, I think the end of my penis has a mind of its own. I think if I cut off my penis, I will gain control over some sort of agency, over some sort of demonic possession that I call myself. And you still haven't even found your identity yet. You're livestock at this point. You're livestock, and you're willing to do or follow any pharaoh or anything else because you're just simply not online yet. But as you come online, you're met with these screaming loud feelings. Feelings of it hurts when I pee. Feelings of I have no control when I keep going out and raping people every night. Or the Bacchus is too strong. I become its servant. All I can do is worship my alcoholism. And so you have Rome just like pushing, just like, go for it, dude, go for it. Can you wake up? Are you online yet? And nothing else works better than a good old dose of paganism. Every one of those experiences is competing for what's your first experience. So you end up having to create rituals that are quite frankly more profound than everything that happens to you during the day, which includes all the giant dildo rituals or whatever else you're doing. You need something more potent than that. And it turns out that if you take your schlong and put it on a barrel and cut the end of it off, you're going to fucking remember that. You're going to remember that. So blood libel is really the exercising of dilation. The brain will remember its peak experience and invoke a ceremony during that time is a deep involuntary commitment. If you suffer some sort of mortal damage, if you go to war is a dilation ceremony, because the fear of war, or what you had to do to survive the fear, is becoming your first fear, your first memory. And every single time that you have another memory, it comes into your brain and thought goes, oh, you got a new memory? What happened? Oh, I smelled a dandelion. Okay, well, let me just turn around and I'm going to look at what was the most insane experience I've ever had and what was the least boring experience I ever had. And then I will store this memory somewhere in between. I will learn what kind of colors to write this with through comparison. This is why the phonological loop remembers things like first and last. That first and last, it turns out, right now, we are a 4-bit mind. We tend to really, really do well with fours, with sets of fours or less. This is why, I'm sure you've heard this, but this is why the phone number is stored that way, because, and we've gotten better at this, but we've been able to add an area code. But a long time ago, 7 was about the maximum you could even imagine. It used to be 4. I used to have 4 digits in my phone number. It probably freaks you out. I used to have 4. We've gone from 4 to 7 to 10. Now you're an IPv6. You have a 6-tiered IP address right now. And so do I. And we have domain name resolves and everything else because our phonological loop is getting better. It's getting more exercise. It's having more attention. So now you know what PTSD is. If you smell a honeysuckle, and you have to turn around and look at the most potent experience you've ever had, you are now reliving that experience. You are reliving that experience. And so PTSD comes quite naturally when no matter what experience is happening, if anything's even close to that area where the Dewey Decimal of where you'd store that experience, you'd have to recall that. And if you recall that and it shuts your system down, if it puts you in shock because the amygdala doesn't know what to do, and it makes sense. The amygdala is like, well, fuck, I can't show you this. It's too horrible. But if I don't show it to you, you're not going to survive. So what does the amygdala do? It fucking shows it to you. It shows you something that it knew you should not see. It knew it. And now you're fucked because you have PTSD. You hacked your own amygdala because you put yourself in an involuntary state. You just didn't know it yet. You don't know that you're involuntarily in war until the IUD hits. until someone fucking shoots you in the ass. Only then do you know, oh wait, this is not an involuntary experience. And the moment you are in involuntary experience and it's dilating, it's going to be 10 times more dilating than all your voluntary experiences are. This is why you need John the Baptist and his 6 burly friends to drown you, to hold you underwater, because you cannot do that to yourself. The terror is quite frankly too loud when someone else does it to you. And I think that we invoke our own ceremonies all the time. We just don't want to admit it to ourselves. So we'll enlist in the army, or we'll say something we shouldn't say, or we'll mouth off, or we won't mouth off, or whatever it is. We will be constantly be playing with our first and last, first and last, first and last. So what is the PTSD survivor supposed to do? It's hard. How do you voluntarily, because the way he does it is you voluntarily go to something that's more dilating. How do you voluntarily go to a place that's more dilating than something that's involuntary? It's very difficult. It's very difficult. I think you're looking at a deep kind of medicine that requires, quite frankly, a lot of manipulation and lying to your patient. That if you could if we had a medical system that didn't insist that it had to be honest, and ironically, it fucking lies anyway. But if we could embrace the fact that medicine needs to lie, did you hear what I said? If we could embrace the fact that medicine needs to lie, I think real healing could begin. We could really start to instigate and step into these kind of ceremonies, which, quite frankly, would take us light years ahead of where we've been. So the potency of blood increases with the association as well. What I mean is that not only do you have I guess you don't need to see this, but not only do you have a first and last regulator, but anything that's like sex magic, death magic, or blood magic, all of these things are going to invoke a more potent experience. And because it's a more potent experience, it will end up persisting as a ritual through time. So sacrificial ritual, that's persisted because it's effective. Castration ritual, that fucking fits because it's consistent and effective. Circumcision, same kind of a thing. Circumcision actually works double because it works on the parents too. The parents are like, yeah, but I went through the pain of having to agree that my child should be circumcised. And this is truly the definition of blood libel. The libel is the exchange. My child will be in pain so I can be saved. You don't think that's what's really happening with circumcision? Because it fucking is. It is. This is called trauma bonding. Fraternities do this, right? I was hazed, but it's okay because I get to haze you. We invoke our own medicine, our own dilation medicine, through disassociation. If I'm the one that doesn't have to do it to myself, it can be more potent. And so we utilize this trick all the time. We utilize this all the time. We typically will install PTSD gates, and now we know who you can trust. I mentioned this today, but if anyone lives in Asheville and just suffered through this hurricane, but you didn't feel like you were a local before this happened, you're a local now. You're a local. You're a local because you were here at a very highly dilating moment, and you will regulate, and people will be able to smell that on you, and you will be able to smell that on them too. And that makes you a local because you've been trauma bonded with the area. I don't say the word trauma bonded a lot because I think trauma is just this soaked in victimhood, and it doesn't have to be. Trauma is just simply, I don't have the tools right now to experience what just happened to me. Yes, trauma can fucking hurt. Yes, life can be unfair, okay? We're talking about, though, just the raw definition of what these words mean. It's a relativistic term, and it's almost always based on your desire to alchemize something that bad happened to you, or your insistence that there's no way you could alchemize it, because if you did alchemize it, it would ruin the victimhood of what you've got. This is a really big part of this ceremony. So all magic is blood magic, because all magic is going to require you to evaporate. The only kind of magic that doesn't exist, you can write this down, the only kind of magic that doesn't exist is magic that doesn't actually require anything from you. Or it requires something so small or petty from you that it's absolutely pointless. Voting is a kind of that magic. I think just having positive thoughts, to be honest with you, can sometimes be that kind of magic. I'm saying sometimes because it really is a creative force behind positive thinking. But can you positively burn something? Can you positively be aware that there's no such thing as a trivial moment? Because if you understand the true magic of blood, the true ritual of what's behind these things, then you'll understand there's no such thing as a trivial moment. Every single moment is fully invoked. And every moment's giving you an opportunity to reach a new level, to set a new record on, excuse me, on what your first or your last is. Sorry. Ooh. Sorry about that if I cough too loud. The point I'm trying to make here, though, is that the potency of blood is going to be directly proportional to your ability to discern with enough consciousness to where you are invoking your will into every red blood cell. These red blood cells have been emptied out for you. They're entering into the heart and they're awaiting your orders. If you as king do not have a firm order, then a limp order will be installed. And the red blood cells will function limply. Almost all of sports psychology is based on elite medicine, which is the elite psychology, I believe, of associating into each cell. You associate your will into each cell. This is just like why I said earlier, it's positive thinking is a good thing. This is a very powerful act. And then after you perfect it, I think all your calligraphy when it comes to being in your body, being fully actuated, that you start to also hone. Well, you're doing it with your mind too, but it's so important no matter how physically fit you are that you hone your mind too, that you really get behind the idea of imbuing all these cells, of imbuing all this willpower, and it's coming from your nucleus. If you consider that every cell in your body that has your full DNA in it is an association target. Who you are is the Elohim, and the Elohim is anything that has found your DNA signature anywhere in this world. Anywhere in this world. Anywhere in this world. All of your juices. If your juices have been expunged in places and your DNA is still there, you are associated in that place. You are in that cell. All the nostalgia, all the sentimentality that you spread, if you make something, if you write a note, you are evaporating blood cells. Those blood cells are converting into chemo signals or smells. Those smells are being inserted, into the page. That letter's being sent. The letter's being read. The smells are decoded, and the focus of the will is downloaded into the reader's mind. This is blood magic. It's blood magic. So we seek out our own wizardry. We seek out how to inflame our own wizardry, how to grow our own wizardry. And one of those ways is to learn to hold power in the mind through association. Association. I think this is really at the heart of what fantasy is. When you fantasize, when you daydream, when you meditate, when you look up and it's been 3 hours later, you are just fully associated. There's a Hermetic Freemason thing called the Chamber of Reflection. And the Chamber of Reflection is a series of props that when you stare at these props, they're supposed to open your mind, almost like a mudra. I can't think of the word. A piece of Zen that you contemplate for a while. And the contemplation acts as an exercise. And you might think that the purpose is to unlock something, and it's fine. But really the exercise is just to learn to associate, learn to associate, learn to associate. And so when you see one of the images in the Chamber of Reflections is a rooster, but it has a horned Venus on top, you're like, what the fuck does that mean? What the fuck does that mean? Why is rooster a horn Venus? Why is a horn Venus rooster? What is the horn Venus? Why is Hermaphroditus the rooster? And Abraxas, you think about Abraxas, and you think about the Statue of Liberty. And all these things are building enthusiasm, just like James True builds enthusiasm for his show. And I try and deliver that enthusiasm, and the number of witnesses that comes to watch this show is pretty much directly proportional to the amount of magic that I have. I'm a 105 right now, magician right now. Why? Because the enthusiasm I have is contagious enough, and I've set enough first neurons in your mind to where when you recall my name, you think, hey, this might be a good vibe. I might want to smell what the rock is cooking in this case. All of this is blood magic. Even though you're not in my house, you still smell what's happening because the vibration coming off my face. You can actually see my pulse. We know this now. You can see it. You actually, some of you don't want to hear the word AI, but AI would prove this to you, because AI would be able to analyze my face and it could see my capillaries exploding. It would see them. It'd see the transmigration of red blood cells. The red blood cells transmogrify. Did you know that? They empty themselves so they can hold more will. They're allowing you to insert iron that has a charge, right? Iron holds a charge. They're holding iron so it can hold a charge from you. The oxygen is telling it the tale. It's conveying the information. It's reaching out to the end of the capillary, and finally at the end of the capillary, the red blood cell says, my time is done, and it transmogrifies itself. It's able to slip through the very barriers of reality itself. It's able to step back. And part of the reason why it's able to step back is because it has no identity. It's pure demon at this point. All blood, all red blood cells are pure demons. They're demons possessed by you in the heart. In the heart. And so when we think about sacrifice, when we think about castration, when we think about all the magic of Rome, all the things that you're doing, you're looking at a dilation psychotic ceremony where people are simply just trying to regulate. Even today, people are simply just trying to regulate with each other, right? They're trying to make sense. You can check out Chamber of Reflections and find more of these. We'll cover this next time. Man, this is a great book. Other Scholars' Myths. Just so you know, it's the Daksha stuff. There was one book that, I couldn't find online. I really wanted to read it. This lady's just out of sight. And this is her. This is part why Daksha hasn't been brought up yet. But Daksha actually is tied into sacrifice too. Sacrifice and fertility. So we'll be able to pick that up again. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Great to see you. Let me know what you think in the comments, and we'll see you next time with James True Live. Oh, we have an airship today at 7:00. If you want to come by and say hi, ask some questions or challenges, or just hang out and see what's up, then come by. You can just join Patreon. The invite's there for everyone, and it's a Zoom call. You just click on the link, or you can call in and do it, either one. You don't have to say anything. You can come and go as you want. But that'll take place here in 56 minutes. So hopefully we'll see you then. Thanks for watching James True. Have a wonderful Friday. Take care. Good to see you, Mel, Legion, Mark, Mash, Richard, Beast, Stretch, Synthetic, Adrian, Autumn. Autumn, good to see you too. Good to see everybody. Take care.